these 4 legs have now been glued up. They're looking pretty good. Some of them are basically perfect. You know, there's no gaps between the wood. It's solid. It just needs to be trimmed down to size now. But there's a couple that I want to talk through real quick that are not so good. So this one, we can see that there's actually quite a big gap between these 2 pieces. Now, I think if I was doing this properly, I'd be very tempted to run this through the table saw to split it back down and make sure that I can glue it up better, because I really don't like the size of that gap. But because it's for outdoor furniture, it's going to split and crack and warp in the sun and rain anyway, so I'm not super fussed about that. And again, I think the joint is going to be strong enough. I'm not going to try and do much about that right now. I'm going to leave it as it is. But this particular piece, this bottom one here, yeah, you see there's a small lip along the whole length of this piece. Now that's something I could do something about that. So what I'm going to do now is just run the hand planer over the top of this a few times just to get the glue excess off. I mean, there's a mark here where I had one of my clamps trying to press across the joint to level it out, but that didn't really work. I mean, maybe I had all the other clamps too tight or something, but you can see the other side. It's a little rough again. So run the planer over the top of this, get it presentable, and then we can move on to cutting these down to size. Something I wanted to show. I'm getting 2 types of shavings off of this. Some are these nice, long, straight, kind of picturesque, if you will, shavings from the planer, and a lot then are these kind of really fluffy little bitty bits. The reason for that, this wood is obviously not perfectly straight, so as you come across with the planer, which is perfectly straight, you're taking all the tiny little differences in the wood and picking them up on the first few passes until it all becomes really consistent. And once it is consistent, you can start pulling these nice big long stretches. So I'm using that as a cue to say that I've done enough planing on here. As soon as I stop getting all this fine stuff and start getting these nice clean strips, that's when I move on. Okay, so I finished the legs. They've all been planed nicely. They're all stacked up, ready to be cut. So what I need to do now is just work out exactly how big they need to be. So the height should be about 470, but I'm aiming to get 2 legs out of each piece, something along the lines of cut in the middle. So they need to be 470 each, plus a few mil. Can't remember how wide the blade is. I think it's 2 or 3 mil. We'll call it 3 mil. The idea is wherever that totals, is that 943? Well, that's what I need to cut these down to this size, so then I can run them through again to get them down to 470 a piece. So what I'm going to do first is mark them all up to get the nice bits, because there's going to be some overhang on there. So what I want to do is find where this line is on each piece, cut those off, measure the 943, cut off there, and then find out the 470 and cut them down the middle. On second thought, what I'm going to be doing, I'm still going to take these sizes, but what I'm going to do first is find out where this line is, cut that off on every piece, just the one side, and then what I'm going to do is set up the table saw's rip fence to be 470 wide. So then that's all I have to do is use the table fence as a kind of a stop block to get every cut exactly the same size. That way when I come to assemble, I'm going to have 4 legs that are all, well, I'm going to have 8 legs actually. I'll only do 4 for the time being. That will all be 470 each, making sure that at the very least there's not going to be much, if any, rocking. So those lines don't come together very well, and that's usually indicative that either your square, this thing, is not bang on 90 degrees or the wood isn't square. Now, because I've just been playing in this table saw in this willy-nilly, and I've not been checking for much square as I've been going along, I'm actually surprised it's as close as it is. That's the only reason I'm marking this now, is just to cut them down to the length, so it doesn't need to be super square. But again, this is the kind of thing you want to, I don't know, treat as a red flag if you're doing anything very specific. In this case, it's fine. I'm just going to use this as a guide for when I throw these through the table saw. Okay, so to cut the ends off of these, I need to use the mitre fence instead of the rip fence, because I need to make sure that these cuts are going through the blade at 90 degrees. Now, when you're setting this up, I personally never really trust the gauge that comes on the back of these. So let's set this up. Say it's on the wonk completely. What I'll do to set this up is take a known 90 degree angle, like my square here, put it up against the blade, and then keep that tight to the blade and push the loose fence against it. So once it's all nice and square and taut, keep it tight, tighten it back down, pull it away and push it back just to check, is there any gap anywhere along this contact, and if not, you got a nice 90 degree mitre against your blade. Okay, so I've set up the saw now ready to cut the legs to size. I'm going to still use the mitre gauge, but this time I've extended the table out. There's a neat little lever under here that lets me do that. And I've put a little stop block out here, which I've measured to be 470mm from this edge to the cutting part of the blade. But using a tape measure to do that was a little finicky, so what I'm going to do is run a piece of scrap wood through this, measure that, see how it comes out, and then reconfigure to suit. I'm glad I decided to do a test piece. This one was 10mm out, because what I ended up doing, and I think this is a very common mistake, so when you come to measure with these tape measures, the bit on the end is a little flexible. It's got a little bit of give, like about 1mm or so. So when you come to measure the distance from, say, the blade to the stop block, it can be a little tricky to know if you're kind of millimeter perfect, just because of that little give on the end. So what a lot of people do is they'll measure from a known number, so either rest the line of the 1, 2, or for the US, start from the 1 inch mark, measure out to the size you need, and then add whichever one you started from. But I started from 2 and measured to 48, I think, so I should have measured to 49, and that's where the 20mm difference in this piece came from. So not only am I glad that I kept these little bits, because I knew they'd come in handy, but I'm glad I actually took a practice cut, because now I know that it would have been wrong. So let's fix that up, get it done properly. are post cut, and they're all as near as makes no difference now, the same size, which is great. So what I can do with these now is pop them to one side, get working on the rest of the boxes. Okay, now that all the wood's cut down to size, there's only two real jobs left other than assembly. First, we need to get these all connected up, but to do so, I need to get some pocket holes drilled into the side of these beams so that they can connect to the legs. I also need to get a little groove cut underneath to house the T and G. So the idea is, instead of trying to butt these clean against the beams, I'm just going to go ahead and cut a small notch. Let's get a pencil. Small notch into each of these pieces, something like that. Cut that out with a router so that these T and G can fit nicely in the top, and then they'll be the same on the bottom so that they get housed nicely. Okay, let's talk about that groove. So the plan is to use this little jig that I've made for the last bench, the last box, sorry. The idea with this is that we've got some guidance rails up here for the router to sit in, and then the gap in the middle is to slot each piece in. The idea is house the beam in here and then pop the router in and make a pass through across the middle. It's all set up so that the center of the router bit is going to run along the center of this board. What I will have to do is make multiple passes, maybe 3 or 4, just to get the depth that I need, because I need to go down a good 20 mil. So let's get set up and let's start making some grooves.